it's becoming a TikTok, Instagram, Reels world. So, we all have to have this mindset of becoming content creators. It's not, just some 25-year-old kid developing content. It's all of us now that really have to get in to telling, to all these forms of content, and because it's becoming an attention economy.
It
It's
really
something I'm
is.
feeling from Ezra Klein, who's a columnist in the New York Times. But you just have to constantly get content out there to have share of mind.
Welcome to The Move In, a senior living marketing podcast from Unlock Health, a full-service marketing partner for the aging services industry. Join us for candid conversations exploring the latest marketing strategies with the senior living community leaders and innovative solution partners who are moving our industry forward. Together, we'll build a community to build better communities. Are you creating content that connects or just checking a box? That's the question we're unpacking today. Hello, I'm Larry Williams, and welcome to the Move In Senior Living Marketing powered by Unlock Health. Senior living marketing is about telling the right stories, reaching the right people, and doing it in a way that builds trust and drives action. In this episode, I am joined by my friend and senior living content consultant, Bryan Reynolds. We talk about how to start small, build a lasting strategy, and create meaningful content that resonates across all levels of care and audiences. Whether you're just getting started or looking to level up your content game, this one's packed with practical takeaways you can use immediately. Bryan and I covered a lot of ground, but here are three main areas that stood out. First, we discussed building a solid content strategy, starting small with something manageable like a blog, then gradually expanding into video, newsletters, and a full editorial calendar. It's all about staying consistent and building momentum. Second, we got into the power of storytelling. In senior living, the most meaningful content often comes from real stories, whether it's about a resident's journey or a team member's why. That's what truly connects with people, not just a list of services or amenities. Third, we explored how video is king right now and how you can repurpose one video into blog content, social media clips, or even audio. It's a smart way to get the most out of your efforts and reach your audience wherever they are. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the content possibilities out there or wondered how to speak to multiple audiences without losing your voice, this one's for you. Let's jump in. All right, we are on the move in senior living marketing. I got my friend Bryan Reynolds with us today. One thing I love about the senior living community is that this group is highly active on LinkedIn. And there are many, many people that I've gotten to meet and become good friends with just by LinkedIn connections. I think, Bryan, we probably connected about a year ago or so, and come to find out we were just big fans of one another's content. We're like, let's just chat. And that began a friendship, and the things we love talking about, families. We love catching up on each other's families. And we also have always enjoyed chatting about senior living content. And, in our last conversation, I said, hey, let's get you on the podcast. Like, we're having these great conversations. Let's go ahead and just record it because it might be beneficial for others to hear. And with you being a content consultant for the senior living space, man, I just wanted to get you on board and so you can share that knowledge with everybody. So welcome to the Move In, Bryan Reynolds.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here, Larry. I am so impressed with the content that you created over the last couple of years. And, you were definitely somebody I just felt like I needed to reach out and get to know more. And I know you've made a lot of those relationships, throughout the last few years in senior living. And it's just because you create so much great content and you really connect with your audience. So I'm thrilled to be here and to be able to be on your podcast. So
man, that means thank you for saying that. That means the world to me. I think there's this authenticity when it comes to everyone in the space, especially on the senior living marketing side. And that's why I feel like when everyone connects at these conferences, man, there's just like so much good vibes going through.
Yeah.
And there's a constant better way thinking and then engaging outside of those spaces to develop these conversations. And man, I've learned so much from you when it comes to all things content. And you've been on both the agency as well as the community side. And I think
Yeah.
that positions you to really guide a lot of these conversations, and you can see things in different ways that others might not. And so again, you're someone that I've leaned on, for guidance, and just thank you for sharing, some of your thoughts today. We're going to talk a lot about content, all things
Uh-huh.
content and senior living marketing. Let's start here. What do you see as content? And you and I kind of touched on it before we really started this conversation. I
Yeah.
think far too often people think of content as, like blog posts or
Hmm.
written content. But
Yep.
as you and I know, man, content really can go in different ways. And there's so much more to unpack when we think about the word content in senior living marketing.
Yeah. Well, I think content can really come in many different forms. As you mentioned, blogs is important. It's a really important foundation, particularly in senior living, to be able to build community and provide expertise and to do storytelling. But as we're here now, video is becoming more and more important in what I'm calling the content stack.
Mhm.
So having video and then audio content on its own is really becoming more and more important, as people use Amazon Alexas and Siris, and AI becomes more important in our daily lives. It's just all of these different venues, and then the distribution, in so many different forms, whether it's, again, video on your website, video on social media, YouTube. It's becoming a TikTok, Instagram, a Reels world.
Yeah.
So, we all have to have this mindset of becoming content creators. It's not, just some 25-year-old kid developing content. It's all of us now that really have to get in to telling, to all these forms of content, and because it's becoming an attention economy.
It
It's
really
something I'm
is.
stealing from Ezra Klein, who's a columnist in the New York Times. But you just have to constantly get content out there to have share of mind.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like at the foundation of it, it's storytelling.
Yep.
And I'm sure you will echo this, but we need to make sure we're telling the right stories. The stories are what brings people together. And
Yep.
you know, I, what's your thoughts there? Because I think far too often we get caught up in those, the features and services and benefits and
Yep.
amenities.
Yep.
What's your guidance when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to content?
Yeah, I do think providing information is helpful. When you're providing information about maybe how to downsize,
Mhm.
or, those are all things that are on our consumers' minds. Information for caregivers, information about dementia, information about programming is important to provide. Being that expert is one strategy. But the other side that's a little more challenging is the storytelling. And it is a critical piece, because at the end of the day, our consumers want to put themselves, in other people's shoes, to imagine how life is going to change for them, or how life is going to be for them as they move into the communities. And it's just an excellent way. We all know testimonials are so important, but it's really going a step beyond that by sharing that everyday experience. And it's not just one experience. There may be one opportunity in dining, maybe one opportunity with a certain activity, and you can bring to life these benefits through great storytelling,
Sure.
and the relationships between staff and residents, or residents and residents. And so when you get into that, you really start selling, those benefits, and you can position yourself very uniquely versus many of the competition that is really focused on features and
Yeah.
amenities.
And it's about capturing that attention and really engaging with the audience
Yeah.
in a variety of ways. Now, when we think about engaging with the audience, one big struggle is that with senior living, you're speaking with multiple audiences.
Mhm.
What's your advice to senior living providers when they are trying to connect with multiple audiences, whether it's those seeking residents themselves or their
Mhm.
family members, specifically their adult children, who are helping them with that process?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important to develop a content strategy at the heart of it. So, really knowing who you're talking to, what are your priorities, and who are you talking to, and then what tone of voice are you using is really
Mm.
critical to all think about up front. And then building really a library of topics that then you can start planning from an editorial standpoint. And you want to do this maybe quarter by quarter, or even 6 months or even out a year, so that you kind of plan slotting, talking to those various audiences. And that way, when you've got it all laid out, you can see the balance that you have in this editorial calendar that you've set up based on the topics and the various audiences that you're
Yeah.
speaking.
I appreciate you adding that. It's so complex, and I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes we see it and we become overwhelmed, and because there's so many different vehicles, the
Yep.
different audience, how to approach the content. For those, I mean, we think about that editorial calendar,
Hmm.
but for those who seem, I'd say, overwhelmed by all of this, what's
Yeah.
your advice to a group when you say, like, look, just start small? What
Hmm.
what are those building blocks? Like, what's your advice to a community who's just looking to really get the lay of the land and build that foundation, but wanting to start small and build out from there?
I love how you talk about it in terms of building blocks, because that's definitely what I've used throughout my career, particularly in senior living. When I came into the senior living industry 12 years ago, it was really about inbound marketing and getting content out there. And it was very basic. It was, what are the 5 foods to stave off dementia? Or here are some healthy heart tips for you. Very, very basic. But after time and more experience, we started building in some of those stories. But to go back, really having a spreadsheet of a list of those topics. And one of the things that I've kind of worked on with some of my partners throughout the years, both at Orchard Digital Marketing and at ERS, is how do you categorize it? Especially based on the consumer journey. So categorizing all those steps for questions that are really going to be of value to people, or how do we share benefits of what we're
Mhm.
sharing in storytelling? And so really listing all of that out by a category. And when I say category, I almost think of a business as a publisher. Think about a newspaper, how it's laid out in terms of sports and business
Mm.
sections and local news. And then, so once you have all that organization by topic, you can display that in an organized way. And then you put that into a spreadsheet with a calendar. So then you can see, oh, I'm going to talk about this topic. So you kind of take
Yeah.
the step by step approach, as you talk about with building blocks, to really plan this out. So here you've got your topics, then you put in your calendar, and then, make sure it's all organized. And then, you push it out to your blogs and then your distribution system. So it's just
Yeah.
having that plan step by step that I think is really critical, because you're right, it can get very overwhelming or too simplified if you're not
It's
thinking through it all.
Yeah, and what I have found is once you start like breaking it down to individual pieces, it's almost like you create these bubble charts. And then,
Yep.
you're thinking about this and this leads you to, oh, this needs to be, stated. And let's create an article or a post about this. And oh, we can't
Yep.
forget to add that in. And that creates its own,
Yep.
section. I love how you said it like it's like a newspaper. It's different
Yeah.
sections. How,
Yep.
Do you leverage meta tags or how do you keep
Mhm.
that together? Is there a system that you can advise on? I know we're going a little deeper into this conversation, but just for my
Yeah.
knowledge, this is something I struggle with is which is the organization of it. It's, we
Yeah.
think about this in, the small picture terms and we want to grow it, but man, keeping it organized can be overwhelming at times. And I just want to get your advice on that front.
Yeah, so I think, definitely tagging it by the topic is very important. Those categories
Mhm.
is a part of organizing your content. But to your point about meta tags and then of course SEO, as you're thinking about these topics and then you're doing keyword research, I usually typically like to back in the SEO into the topics. So, if you want to put independent living in Cincinnati, where I live, backing the terms like that into the product. And then now there's all kinds of AI tools, through SEMrush and ChatGTP that you can maybe fuse more keywords in there, and then of course that you can help with updating your meta description and then the
Sure.
meta tags along the way. So I typically don't do the SEO approach first. I kind of do the consumer approach and then back in the meta tags and the SEO into the
Yeah.
articles.
That's great advice. I appreciate that. And when we think about tagging and leveraging different vehicles, one thing that I always say is, make sure to repurpose that content. You don't have to
That's
reinvent the wheel every time. Like you can take a video and repurpose it as a blog post, and then you can take it
Mhm.
from there. I don't want to get too far ahead of you on what your advice would be, but I'd love to get your feedback on repurposing content so it does stay fresh, but you're approaching a subject in different formats, but it's making your job just a little less stressful too.
Well, I think that's the brilliance of video and starting with video, Larry. It's
Love
really,
that.
yeah, you can start with the interview and then run that through a transcription service and then start editing away to creating a blog. So you have a blog and then you have a video embedded, and what we're hearing is conversions are a lot higher when there's video embedded in a blog. So you've got that as a tool, and then you've got the video that you can put out on your social media and then turn it into little clips and release it. Maybe you have 10 clips that you can put out throughout the month, and you've got a theme there
Yeah.
from the blog to a long form video and then to little clips that you're releasing to teasing that content throughout the month on social media. So, repurposing that, and then also you've got maybe this same output in an audio format that can just go out on Apple Podcasts and
Yeah.
Spotify and things like that. So, there really are opportunities, especially when you start with video, really to distribute it in so many ways.
Love that. Thank you for adding that information. I think that's really important. Just again, to meet people where they are in that journey. And you don't
Mhm.
know where everyone, how they're going to consume that information. But if you cast that wide net,
Yep.
you're more likely to connect with someone. Now we spoke about connecting with different audiences
Mhm.
and how that can be a struggle at times, but what's your advice for connecting, based on different levels of care? Because your messaging for independent living will be different than assisted living, which will be far different than memory care. So I didn't know
Yeah.
if you had any advice on that front as well, just because like again, we're adding more complexities to the conversation, but I'd love to get your feedback on that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's two things. Obviously, the messaging is very different, and which means the topic selection is going to be very different. So you want to select topics, whether it's for a caregiver or if it's
Mhm.
more lifestyle driven to a to an older adult. So that's important in itself to have those messages picked out. Then it's a matter of the distribution and where are the people, that those audiences are found. So LinkedIn can be found, can be very good for business professionals and
Mhm.
caregivers. Whereas, and then with older adults, we'll find them more on social media platforms like Facebook and maybe even Instagram to some extent,
Sure.
where younger people tend to be on things like TikTok and Be Real and other platforms that, are more geared towards younger people. So, there's the younger people, the people in the middle, and then the older adults that have very different audiences and
Yeah.
where you would reach them differently.
Okay. So we were speaking about more of that lifestyle, conversation that we'll have and how it's different than really groups that are seeking specific information, like I said, from the independent living side to the memory care. But
Yeah.
going back to the lifestyle side, social media continues to play a very impactful role. And you mentioned a few different social media platforms. I'm
Mhm.
going to say it again. You mentioned a few social media platforms that are driving engagement. Where do you see that moving in the future? Because I'll tell you my theory. Whatever the younger generations adopt now, it will creep up into the older generations. And so, like, it was Facebook,
Yep.
and that's creeped up to where,
Grandma
the
and
baby
grandpa
boomers,
are on.
the younger ones, not so much. And
Right.
so then TikTok, yeah, case in point, my kids are on YouTube all the time, and I
Yep.
used to it drove me crazy. That's how they would consume TV. Well,
Yeah.
now I'm watching a lot of YouTube, so I feel like it creeps up. Do you see the same thing? And what platforms do you see being impactful today? And how do you see that moving into the future?
No, you're exactly right. It's like the kids start on one platform and then the parents join and then the grandparents join. And so you,
Yeah,
you see this kind of stratification based on age for different platforms. But, right now, obviously with older adults, the platform to go is Facebook. And then I think Instagram is the next platform. YouTube is huge for older adults and their children as well. So your and I's generation and our parents are on YouTube consuming a lot of content, as you mentioned. And then but I think at the end of the day, what I really see is video content, no matter what the platform is really going to be the important thing. We're all seeing how TikTok's taken off, and it's not just becoming a platform where it's entertaining, but it's also educating and providing news. And I think that, whatever platforms take off, whether it's in another year or two, I think I saw a new TikTok variant called Lemonade
hmm,
coming out, that's very focused on different topics,
yeah,
very topic driven. So I think there will always be these platforms popping in and up and in, but at the end of the day, I think the video content on whatever platform or visual content is going to be critical. I mean, we're seeing video really important on even LinkedIn now these
oh,
days.
yeah,
So
for sure. Well,
it's
you and I were speaking about it, how engaging it is, and
Mhm.
far too often we feel very
Yeah,
conscious about putting ourselves out there in these video, like whether it's like short blogs, short form content, but it works.
yeah.
That's how people like to consume information.
Yeah, well, let me ask you, Larry. I mean, you've
Okay.
you've really dove into video over the last year. How have you seen your audiences and responses increase?
Sure. So it started off, I was afraid to put myself out there,
Yeah.
but Dave Grau, who used to really lead our marketing efforts in the senior living space, and a good friend of mine, he said, you need to take at that time that SEO Thursday tip, it stopped typing it out, but make it into a video. I was like,
Mhm.
Dave, I don't want to do that. He said, I'm telling you, it's going to work. And so you and I joked around before, like anytime that I record a video and my kids see it or they hear
Mhm.
me filming it, they make
Yep.
fun of me. They're like, "Oh, dad thinks he's an influencer now." So
Right.
it's really awkward, but I'll tell you this though, Brian, I'd say it increased the engagement. I'd say
Mhm.
5 to 7-fold. Like
Yeah.
it's drastically different. And
Yeah.
something else you and I've spoken about, which is, it doesn't cost a lot of money to do this stuff.
Mhm.
For we've spoken before. Like I have a little clip that goes into my phone that has a little microphone that goes on the lapel. That
Yeah.
was like $30 from Amazon. And so,
Yeah.
like, I think so much of it is just that willingness to put yourself out there
Mhm.
and invest just a little money. and you're off to the races. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, to answer your question, it has worked. It's
Mhm.
just really makes you feel awkward at time, but it does work. It does, help with engagement. Sorry,
Yeah.
I gave you a
Well,
long answer for I
no,
that was a
that
therapy
was
session for a little bit for me. I appreciate you letting me get that off my chest
well,
about how awkward it can be, but the putting yourself out there, it ends up being worth it at the end.
right. Well, and I think that's the reality for brands. We're
Mhm.
seeing this creator world coming, and I think we all assume it's kids going to restaurants or, you know, providing their, a story about their travels, but it's really for brands too
Sure.
to be a part of this creator network, I think these days. And to your point, it's so much easier and the tools are not expensive and it just takes a little practice and time and the more you do it, the better you get. I told you before, this interview, my career started out in television production and spent a lot of money on college to learn how to edit and shoot, and now everybody can do it. And so I think it's important for brands to think about being ongoing, content creators, not just, leaving it to the young kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you say that about, brands leveling up. It's not just for the kids to create, TikTok dance videos, but, like we can leverage real stories.
Yeah.
And I think I say it every time I speak at a conference, but senior living has the best stories, how their staff got into senior living,
Yep.
like stories about their residents and their lives and
Mhm.
the geography. There's so
Yep.
much to unpack here that the groups are missing a great opportunity if they're not investing in it. And something that I keep thinking about is what Gary Vaynerchuk said. The marketing, I'd say, thought leader. I heard him in a podcast. He is referring to everybody's afraid of social media and the power of
Yeah.
social media, but then at the same time organizations are afraid to invest in it. It's like you can't play both ends. Like lean into it and you will be rewarded. I think one thing I'd like to get your feedback into this, which is it's hard to capture what that ROI is in social media. And I
Yeah.
think that's a struggle is because groups are, we're going to invest in it. We're going to invest in these videos. We just don't know what that ROI is. And have you run into that through working with different providers?
Yeah, it is challenging. I think there are definitely measurements, KPIs that you can set up to provide some value. It depends on, how well I think you connect your CRM systems to your digital media efforts,
Yeah,
whether you're, following that flow through the consumer journey from, say, a social media post into a lead and then into a customer. But just think about it like this, Larry. I mean, if in our industry, let's just say a monthly rental is $4,000, and you get a move in based on your social media, a lead generation from social
sure.
media, that's what, almost $50,000 for the year. And, if you're in the not-for-profit world where you might have an entrance fee, there might be 200, $500,000 entrance fee. So, you can put in some measurements, to see how valuable those potential consumers are. And even though the prospect journey can be very long,
Mhm.
you can still kind of measure it, over time if you've got all those KPIs in place. So,
Yeah.
but you can also measure, just the amount of impressions you're getting, because that's important. You can measure the likes and comments and clicks that you're getting from it. If it's transferring over your website, you can look at domain authority and how many
Mhm.
people are reading your blog. So there's a lot of KPIs that you can really put in there, all the way to the sales channel that you can measure. And certainly over the 12 years that we set up at ERS, our inbound marketing system, you could really see that correlation between people coming in through social media and other channels, and then really engaging in the content and maybe going on a wait list and then
Yeah.
on to move in. So you can measure it, but there's, several different ways you can go about doing it.
Man, that was great advice. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think it's a good way to wrap this up because
Mhm.
when it comes down to it, it's always about the KPIs and data. So it's if we can pull all this together, it's a win for everybody. So
Yeah.
that my where we're going to go next, I just like to hear what's your one piece of advice that you give to senior living providers, like to the marketing teams about how to elevate their content strategy
Mhm.
in 2025. What's your advice that you share with the majority of people you connect with?
Well, I think, just getting in and doing it and creating a system, and it goes back to what you said earlier, Larry. Do building blocks. Start with one thing and just get that kind of nailed down and doing it well. Maybe it's just doing a blog regularly once a month. And then the next year, set your bar higher and start infusing video into those blogs. And then, add a newsletter after that. And then, do a social media, campaign around all of this with paid digital advertising pointing to your content. So, you
Absolutely.
know, just doing one thing at a time, especially if resources are limited, the audience will build over time, and it's really fun to watch not just the audience build, but then the conversions from that.
Sure.
It's I saw it over 12 years and couldn't do it all right away, but we just kept adding things up to doing a podcast. And it
Sure.
not only was it just fun for myself and the team to do, but it really had results that helped the bottom line of the organization.
I love that. And I feel like it boils down to give yourself, make sure you have a plan, give
Mhm.
yourself time, and give
Yep.
yourself grace. Like
Yes. Yeah. Don't
it,
don't 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 be afraid to make mistakes. Right.
yes, I
You're
love
gonna
that.
do it, but you're gonna get better and better. And I've seen people that didn't have any experience and really they came off as good as a newscaster.
Yeah, and you don't know what's going to hit, what's not. So don't dwell on if it doesn't get it, the traction that you were hoping for. Move on to
Yeah.
the next one. It's you can continue to move forward. So, Bryan, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I think we could have probably recorded the 10 minutes before we jumped on air and captured some of that conversation. And as always, you're a wealth of information, and I appreciate your friendship. And
Yeah.
look forward to seeing you at the next event. Before we go, I need to find out where can people find you.
Well, I can be found on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Bryan Reynolds on LinkedIn, and of course, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and of course, people want to email me. My email is brianray1@gmail.com.
Awesome. That's great stuff. Bryan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Larry. Big fan.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for joining me today, Bryan. Here are 3 specific notes that I took during our conversation. First, start with one content channel and build from there. Don't try to do everything at once. Begin with a consistent blog or video series, and once that's solid, expand to newsletters, social media, or podcasts. Second, tell stories that show, not just sell. Focus on real-life experiences from residents, staff, or families that helps prospects envision themselves in a community. Stories build emotional connection and trust. And third, repurpose content across platforms. Maximize your efforts by turning one video into multiple assets, clips for social, a blog post, an email feature, or even podcast content. One piece of content can go a long way. Thanks again to Bryan for his insights, and until next time, let's go make some meaningful connections.
Thank you for listening to The Move in Healthcare Growth. Add your voice to the conversation. Email the show at themove@unlockhealthnow.com. Follow us on social media and stay up to date at unlockhealthnow.com. Also, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode.